jump right in.
Okay, so I'm Kat. I was here last time. My background, I'm Dominican and Puerto Rican from Massachusetts.
I'm Zanetta. I'm African American, and I live in the DC area.
I'm Tega Swan. I'm Nigerian American, and I live in southwestern PA.
Well, I'm Siobhan. I'm Black Native, and I'm from Jersey.
Hi, my name is Renetta Chester Thornton. I am of African American descent from North Carolina. Woo woo. I am the VP over Georgia. I've been in Georgia since 1995. I'm an Army veteran. I have 2 bachelor's degrees underneath my belt. I enjoy helping people, and I have a nonprofit, Refuge Women's Transition Center, here in Atlanta, Georgia, for women. Okay, I guess I would start. One of the things that happens a lot in the African American community is we have a hard time communicating with our African brothers and sisters, because we were told one thing about our African brothers and sisters, and then our African brothers and sisters were told another thing about us. Our African brothers and sisters were taught that we're lazy and we don't work and we don't want to work. However, we're taught in America about our African brothers and sisters that they're steep, they're unlearned, they dance to Druid music, which is the music with the drums, and they told us in rap and hip hop that they went over and took Druid music, which is witchcraft, and put it in the music. But I was under understanding there was no such thing as good and bad music. All music came from God. So that was said in order to keep us from communicating with each other. Does anyone else have anything to add to that?
The things that I had also heard were the same things that Renetta had mentioned, and that was the only thing that I had ever really been. I wasn't taught that. It wasn't from my family, but just within the Black community itself was the same issue with Africans from the continent themselves as opposed to African Americans.
So some of the silly things we have been told, right, Renata?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we were talking about being of African American descent here in the United States. And before I ever stepped foot in Africa, just visiting, I was told as an African American that my African brothers and sisters were told that we're ignorant in America and we're lazy and we're unlearned. But then at the same time, they stink and don't baths. They're savages, and they use Druid music and witchcraft. So the R&B artists are using the Druid music to put inside their music. And when I came to realization that Druid music is just African beats, so I'm like, that's not witchcraft, but it was just an act of the Caucasian population to keep us separated, because if we're separated, we can't assist each other. You see what I'm saying? Has anyone else had those same issues?
I had those issues before. I was also taught
Or concerns, or have heard the same information?
I've heard the same, and also heard that not to get too close to Africans from the continent because they don't like Black Americans, that we were seen as less than, and if you try to get in contact or connect with them, they're going to look at you as less than and not be bothered. So you're just better off not even talking to them at all.
Oh, as a Nigerian American, I never forget my first time in the States. I was fresh out of college, and I was asked by a lot of people who first met me, if we slept on trees, you know.
Wow.
And I remember being so amazed, but I had a quick comeback because I could not imagine anybody asking that question. So I said, yeah, we sleep on trees, and when you come to visit me, I'll keep the next one, the tree next to me for you. I've come to find out that that was just the first of many, many assumptions that I was going to run into. In the US, people assumed that we didn't know stuff. I had a lady one time who wanted to show me how to make a bed, you know, and just running into this kind of attitude from African Americans versus me as a Nigerian American. It has been a thing of, like Renata said, I had the sense that we are perceived as savages. On the other hand, after being in the States, or rather as soon as I came, one of the things that I picked on quickly was the negative reputation of African Americans. I remember vowing that I would never date an African American. Guess who I married? Uh, but that was because of how they were portrayed, you know, that they were lazy and they didn't have their act together, and things like that. It took me the past 11 years just living really close quarters with African Americans to really get a sense of who they were, and to find out that those stories are not true.
That's good. That's good. Anyone else? Okay, go ahead, Kat.
So I mean, just to speak on my experience, I can't really say there were many things that I heard specifically about the African Americans here, or people, you know, native to Africa. I mean, maybe some of the things that some of you already mentioned in terms of like, Africans from Africa not liking Black people here, and so I mean, I've heard that, but from my experience, you know, when I was when I was asked or asked if I could identify anything within my upbringing that was, you know, sort of like white lies or things that were told to me about other cultures, the first thing that came to mind was Haitians, because I'm half Dominican, half Puerto Rican. Actually, even about Dominicans, because I don't know if you guys have heard this before, but that Dominicans and Puerto Ricans are like, you know, oil and water, and, you know, they don't really get along. So I heard it from, you know, there are things that were said about my Dominican side, from my Puerto Rican side, who are, you know, more fair skin and light, and the way that they talked about Dominicans, and then also from my Dominican side, how they talked about Haitians. You know, the relationship between Haitians and Dominicans, you know, it's a really complicated situation, and not my immediate family, but my family there who live there right now, and I used to go and visit, would say a lot of things about Haitians, and I remember when I was little being afraid of them because of some of the things that were said. You know, one of the things that I used to hear all the time is that they practice voodoo, you know, that they steal little kids to sacrifice them, you know, stuff like that. So I grew up, you know, listening to those things. And funny enough, I married a Haitian guy. So it's something that still goes on even today. I think I was telling Zanetta that I recently, you know, kind of, I mean, not got into it, but I had to really call my aunt out on some stuff that she was saying. She's 80 years old. Probably shouldn't, you know, do that, but I felt like I had to, because she was still spewing some of that about Haitians, and I've been arguing with my whole family from DR about everything that's going on over there right now. So yeah, I don't know. I want to keep going.
I see Elizabeth. I see Elizabeth was able to join us. Elizabeth, do you want to introduce yourself?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Well, I am Bolivian, and but I've been here and pretty much grew up in Indiana. It's probably not the best place to grow up in when you're not like everybody else. Because at the time I came, there were very few Hispanics. The only Hispanics people knew here were people that came during the seasons of picking tomatoes and whatever. So they stayed very shortly here, and they were always Mexican. So people then, and even still a lot now, think of any Hispanic as being a Mexican. You know, they assume I like Mexican food, for example, and or that I have friends. For me, coming to the U.S., I probably had a better opinion of Black Americans than a lot of other people, because my father was a revolutionary, and so he admired people like Malcolm X and Che Guevara, and part of his whole deal was that all the brown people in the world needed to get together. And so I grew up with that idea that what we needed to do is overthrow the colonizers, and if the whole world of brown people were to get together, that we would succeed. So when I came here, as I said, there were very, if any, Hispanics. I really didn't have any Hispanic friends. I was in junior high, and frankly, the only people that really befriended me were the few Black kids that there were also in the school. So my opinion was probably more favorable than to white Americans, truly. But I know I have friends. I worked in Venezuela for 3 years in my early 30s, and I know their idea of Black Americans were coming from television, because a lot of the television is really from the United States. And so when one of my friends came and I took her to Chicago, for example, she was really afraid because she thought that Chicago was filled with Black gangs and that Black people were all like really dangerous criminals and stuff. So and this was also from a British friend who came over. He wanted to see where the ghetto was. So a lot of their opinion, I think it's formed from television, where it's kind of, a lot of they're either into drugs or some kind of complicated prostitution or something deals, So I think especially in Latin America, which there's a problem with colorism there anyway, but I think they get the idea that actually even Black people in South America, like Brazilians, think that Black people in the United States are different. They're more dangerous. They run around in gangs and they're exclusively. But like I said, I was kind of lucky in that I didn't form that. And right away when I came, the people who treated me well were the Black kids. So I guess I felt closer to them and felt more outside of the general white population.
And just to piggyback on what Elizabeth said, I had a similar experience with African Americans, Black people here when I came. I think I mentioned this during the last webinar, was that truly that's when I felt like I had a place, was when I came here and there were so many people that, were darker than me or my complexion. And I didn't have that when I lived in Puerto Rico, so I had that when I visited my family in DR, but there was a lot of colorism issues there. So when I came here, I felt very accepted by, the African American community here and other Black people here. So, yeah, similar experience when it comes to that. So.
Well, and I think that Elizabeth touched on
That's
something
amazing.
important and good in that she pointed out something that a lot of this comes from the colonization. A lot of the misrepresentations within the cultures against our own culture, it comes from the colonization, and it also is very ingrained. It can almost go back, and you can almost say that it goes as far back and ties into internal oppression, and that just continues to be perpetuated within families with the bias against our own kind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with you, Zenator. I agree with you that it's colonization, but I also think one of the ways that has happened, even though as a person who grew up in Nigeria, I'm aware of like tribal discrimination and stuff like that. But I think when it comes to the issue of white versus people of color, I think the thing is there is an assumption that the closer you are to the white folks or white nations, the better you are. And I see that, in the way that there is not much respect for, I think about us Africans as intellectuals. People don't know much about us. They don't assume that we're educated until they meet us. And then when they find out you're educated, they're shocked, and it's kind of weird. So I think there's a level where there's some systemic racism that has somehow been bought by us people of color, that although we are all victims of this, nevertheless, in our hearts, we want to belong. We want to be kind of at the top, right there, the top of the ladder, and top of the ladder means white. So the closer your nations are to the white nations, the more prestige you are, the farther away the nations are, whether by color of skin or by geography, the less respected and less known you are. One of the ways I see this perpetuated for me is this perpetuation of like white superiority culture that ends up really denigrating people of color. I see it happening through the church a lot. When you talk about colonization, we have to also remember this was done by Christians.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just Christians that did. It wasn't just Christians that did that. But before you go on, to touch back on what you were saying, as far as with the colorism and being closest to whiteness, I totally agree with you, what you're saying. But also, we also have to be mindful that a lot of it started out as a survival tactic.
Yeah.
And to be able to have our lives a little bit easier. And then because they became more complicit into it, then it became more, we were actually conditioned to believe that there's not enough for everybody, that everybody cannot be at the table. So then it turned into a man versus man, or woman versus woman, person versus person, and to where it's like, okay, well, I need to ascribe to this whiteness and this way of thinking, so make it easier for me and my family instead of thinking of us as a whole, which is a thing. And another thing is going back to what you were saying about like the misconceptions about Africa and about African Americans between the two of us. Something that needs to be addressed that is not really talked about is within some, I'm not going to say all, but within some groups of Black Americans, there is this form of resentment of like, why did you let them take us? Why didn't you come for us?
Yeah.
And then, and also what you said with the TV, with these, what you see about us on the TV overseas, like in Brazil and whatnot. But over here, it's like the only thing you see about Africa is you can feed a child for 39 cents a day, and they got flies all over their face, and they live in huts, and they're cannibals, and like even as a child, I know it's like that can't be true. I know not. This is not. What are you doing? And that's the only thing they show. So, and people that don't, and I can't say that Black people. I would love for all of us to be able to get to Africa, but I know that's not feasible. That's not sustainable for one thing. And so a lot of us are what I love to call cash poor. So we can't afford to travel to Africa to see what it really looks like and how beautiful it is and how the culture is, and to see the similarities, even though were, like, I would like to say, cut off from our roots, but it was still there within the new culture that we formed. And the little bit of traces of African culture that we have here, and they see the similarities between it. And I think with that needs to be addressed too. And I think that once we able to kind of like discuss this, where how some of them feel this resentment about, we felt like we just been left behind. Like kind of like I hope I'm not spoiling like Black Panther. And if you ain't seen it by now, shame on you for not seeing it already. Like you should have seen it 2-3 times already. But
Yeah.
Killmonger, a lot of Black people have that sentiment, and I do, and I understand where they're coming from, because it's like we've gone through all of this tragedy, and then it's like, where were y'all? Why didn't you come get us? And I think I'm sorry, I'm just out of it, but I think that needs to be addressed too, in order for us to be a more cohesive unit. Because as long as that's still there, there's going to be some type of rift, no matter how small it is. And with this white supremacist country, we cannot have any rifts whatsoever. And also with the colorism, I'm sorry, I'm not going to take too much of your time, but with colorism, that also stems from like a hierarchy, not just white supremacy, which is a form of white supremacy anyway, and misogyny. Because the closer you are, and that's how a lot of white people actually end up, and forgive me because y'all know I really don't do so much anyway, but because they left their culture to subscribe to whiteness. And then anybody that listens to history understands, like, not too long ago, Italians were the minority, and then they got to become subscribed to whiteness. And there was always a beef between the northern Italians and the Sicilians because they have Moorish blood. And because we're seeing these other ones that were minorities at one point in time get to ascribe to white supremacy and reap all the benefits, a lot of people of color believe, okay, well, they were minorities and they made it, so maybe if we just like shuck and jive and tap dance enough, we'll be there. And another thing that I think holds us back is this whole respectability politics that we play and our self-policing. But I'm sorry, but you guys go ahead. I apologize for taking too much.
Yes. Oh, you fine. What you were saying is so true. You said it, Siobhan. Elizabeth said it. Tegan has said it. Kat hit it. And Zanetta has said it. Basically, what everybody is seeing of African Americans is what's on TV. What's on TV is not a great representation. Because I'm an actress, I get very upset a lot at this. When you see a Black woman on TV, if she's with a Black man, she always has an attitude. And then on top of that, she always has an attitude. Like, what do we need Pine Sol to have an attitude? Pine Sol, baby. Why do we need to have an attitude with cleaning the house? I don't understand. So just seeing that part. Okay, and we're gonna move on a little bit. We've already talked about who taught us these misrepresentations. Okay,
I think
and when did you realize?
sorry, Renata, I think I would like to come back to what I was saying about the church.
Yeah.
I'd like to think about what Ngozi Chimamanda, she's tried to speak to the West about the danger of a single story. The place where I find the church complicit is that from the beginning, when the West went out to do missions in people of color countries, from hundreds of years ago, it still hasn't stopped. It's still a one-way traffic. Now, the problem with that is when the missionaries go and come back, they don't ever tell you the full picture. Okay?
Yeah.
They only show, they go through the towns. You will think they didn't even fly through an airport, that they swam there or went through the jungle to get there. They go through all the cities, they go through all the sites, and go straight to one little village where they're working, and that's the picture you're gonna see for the next 50 years of Africa. I find the church complicit in this, in that the church has not really created room for mutuality between Christians of people of color cultures and Christians of Western culture. There's the assumption that Christianity is always going from the West to this global South. And that perpetuates a sense of the savagery, because we don't control the story. They are controlling our story. I remember one of the things that I found really amusing was how one time not too long ago, someone in my community was putting on an African show, right? They knew I was African in the community. Nobody came to ask me to confirm authenticity of that. They read these things from a book written by a white man about African culture, and they see you who's from there. They don't think I should ask, what is it really like? Is this the same? One of the things that irritates me is this issue of Kwanzaa. Kwanzaa is put up and said, this is an African Christmas thing. Well, I grew up in Africa, never heard of Kwanzaa till I came here.
Oh, Kwanzaa, that was actually American.
And so when people say this is how our African folks celebrate Christmas, that's a lie. We do Christmas just like everybody else.
Who told you that?
Oh, that's you see that all the time. The posts there are many posts. I just got into it with a friend. I just corrected a friend of mine who posted it around Christmas time, and said, oh, Kwanzaa is African Christmas. First of all, Africa is not a country, it is a continent. Mm-hmm. And it is so diverse from nation to nation. Yeah. There are so many things that are the same, but because there are so many tribes, we don't have one particular tradition. The only thing that is the same across Africa is the tradition of respect and honor.
Yes.
Other than that, everything else varies. And so for a person to come up and throw one celebration and call it African as though it was a country or a tribe, and then not to create room for the African voices to add to it, or when we add to it, to question us. This is my culture. I'm telling you about it, and you're challenging me. And yet that same is not given on the other side. So for example, I am naturalized. I don't know what that means because I'm still not seen as an American, but I am an American by paper, then lived here for 20 years. I cannot speak into American issues and be heard because I'm still seen as an outsider. But a person will go on a mission trip for 1 week, and they're going to tell you everything about the entire continent. And that was taken as gospel truth. So that's where I see that I think, anyway, maybe I'm going too far ahead, but that's where I see that the church is complicit. If the church would just pull back a little bit and ask, what is the damage we are doing to people of color, their reputations, when we keep pointing out we go through all these towns and we come and we show people only these pictures of roads that are not built. One thing that people do not pay attention to is that you need to hear the stories from the people of Africa themselves to understand what you have to properly interpret what you see. When you talk about people living in huts, nobody tells you that those huts are built on land that those people own. And so while a person may not have money in their hand, they have landed property, which they can rent out for farms. But it's gonna be posited when the Westerners portray that picture to you of that hut. They're gonna portray it like the person has nothing whatsoever. However, we live in the West and we know people go homeless. And we know there are poor people who don't own houses. You know, so I really think we need to try to start to demand in the church, we need to start to demand a diversity of reports, mission reports. We need to stop doing missions in one-way traffic. We need to start inviting people. Talk about my personal experience. I came here first. God called me here first as a missionary. But people never saw me that way because you are Black. So how can a Black person from Africa be coming to do missions in the West?
Yeah.
You know, so.
Okay. So if you don't mind to respond to what you were saying. For one, I don't trust any religion that is used to slaughter whole entire races of people, for one thing. And let's get it right, Jesus was not Black. Jesus was even a Christian, but that's a whole different thing. I'm not even getting into that. But as far as with what you were talking about with Kwanzaa, whoever told you that was like an African Christmas, first of all, you tell them I said it. Go read a book. Tell them go read and go research, do all that. Because actually Kwanzaa was a way for Black Americans to try to get and try to connect with our African roots. Like you said, like you're from, excuse me, I want to misquote you. You're from Nigeria, correct? So like you have that, you have your last name, you have your culture, you know where you come from, like you know exactly what part of it. Where we don't have that, like a lot of us don't know where we came from, and we are longing for that. We had our roots cut, and a tree without roots is dead. So Kwanzaa actually and I guess like to be all fairness, yes, they could have went and asked other Africans about like the culture and stuff like that, but because we do understand that we were taken from different countries in Africa, we don't know what tribe we were from, and then within that tribe or which in the village, what tribe or what family from that village we were taken from, and we don't understand. So what they did was the only understanding that we had was like Swahili, and that was actually taught that was like the language throughout Africa. Like we didn't know there was different languages like Hosa and all these other languages, but all we was taught was Swahili. That was the universal common language. So when they did Kwanzaa, and the thing is, and I understand where you're coming from and how you will be upset about it, but I would like you to look at it as somebody. This is it's somebody that's lost and they're trying to find their way home, but they're going in different directions because they don't know exactly where you're going. And I understand how that will be upsetting to you. And like I said, whoever said that was a like African Christmas, they was all the way wrong anyway. But it was a way for us to try to connect to our African roots. It had nothing to do with Christmas, I guess, because during Kwanzaa, we do give educational gifts to the children. They might have took it as Christmas, because they could have said it was like an African Hanukkah if they wanted, like something simple like that. But I would like for you, if it's possible, for you to look at it at an angle where, like, you know where you come from, you could trace your lineage, and if you see in these things that's wrong, like try not to like be, I'm not saying that you are personally, but like be reactionary, like, oh, they're just, this is not my culture. I understand it because I do that all the time when I see colonizers do stuff that's within the Black American culture, and I understand your frustration. But
that's not even the issue, because I'm a big advocate of allowing African Americans define their own heritage, because they stand in a position that none of us do. They do have to create, they are African Americans. You can't take that away. And that they're not going to be carbon copies of Africans, you know. That's not something that's the issue. I think what is the issue is the lack of recognition of the connections between us, so that we can trust our voices. And that's where my issue of those who tells the story is problematic. When Africans themselves are neither writing about their cultures, but are instead absorbing white culture, we give up the opportunity to educate the rest of the world about who we really are. And when we lose that part, that means we're useless even to African Americans who don't see us as a resource. You see, you see, I will not be a resource.
It's not even like a lack of resource. I think that's the one thing we, like I said earlier, we have to combat, is because we've been conditioned so much to believe that people from Africa cannot stand us. So because we feel like we already get enough from white folks out here, like we don't want to see somebody that looks like us. I'm like, oh, we don't like you. You ain't. I was about to cuss, but you ain't beep. So that will be like, to be honest, like if I try to reach out to somebody that connect to my African roots, and then somebody was like, "Oh, we don't like you because you're African American," like a lot of us don't want to see that. So because they said, "Oh, they're not gonna like you," they're not even going to try to take that opportunity to get to know somebody from Africa, because we don't, like I said, we get enough from the white folks out here. I was like, and we get enough from, I'm gonna say it, people like Kanye West and the other ones shucking and jiving, the Uncle Ruckuses, that make it harder for us out here to do this work and for liberation. And then, but to hear like the people that we're trying to get to learn from can't stand us. That's too much for anybody to take. Like then there's gonna be like, dag, nobody in this whole entire planet likes us. What do we do when not even our own people like us?
But that's part of the lies, because it's the same thing on the other side. We don't feel liked because, again, we see people believing, well, had Black people tell us, African Americans, to go back to Africa. Hello? That's because they believe that you're from the jungle. I've had it. I mean, last year when I just started work on CB Voices of Color and trying to really create awareness in the people of color community, I had a woman from the community who was a minister. She said, or she was like, oh, there is no inequality, blah, blah, blah. And I said, yes, there is. I said, because women do not have the same place as the men. Oh, what does that mean? I said, well, the way you want to look at it is look at it in terms of, what did Martin Luther King fight for? What was he fighting for? Equality of African Americans with white folks, as I said, but somehow within the Black community, we have left the women behind. And she said to me, don't you talk to me about any of that, because I know that better than you. This is not Africa.
Oh,
I'm just, that's
it. Please tell me that was not. Please tell me that did not really happen. Oh,
yes, it did. It's in black and white. I got it in black and white. I got it in black and white on Facebook.
Oh my gosh! Tag me. Please tag me on that. I got some words for her. Tag me on that. Because first of all, if she says something like that, first of all, she doesn't even know who Martin Luther King is. She knows the whitewashed version, when the kumbaya, let's all get along, but don't know about the radical MLK from the last 2 years of his life. So that is going on.
Yeah, so there is the both, is a both end, and this is what we're saying. Somewhere, somehow, we have been fed stories that pit us against each other, regardless of what people
Exactly.
call a group you come from, whether you're Africans versus African Americans or Haitians versus Dominicans. And I really want to hear a little bit more about Elizabeth. Kat's situation, because Kat, you guys have it also almost as bad.
Yes.
Me?
Yes, you can.
Are you referring to the Haitian versus Dominican?
Yeah. Can you shed more light on that for us?
Well, you know what? I kind of lightly touched on the whole Dominican versus Puerto Rican thing, and that's a big thing that even it carries on to here. And I know that a lot of people who aren't either or know that there's tension between the two, right? A lot of people, whenever I say I'm Dominican and Puerto Rican, they're like, "You're what?" Like that's not really. Not that it's not common, but even those who are, they claim one or the other, and I've always identified as both. And the reason they do that is because there is a lot of tension between Puerto Ricans and Dominicans. So I hear it from my family side. My mom's family actually disowned my mom when she she and my father met. They stopped talking to her for a while, and
What's the history between the Dominicans and the Haitians?
So that my mom is Puerto Rican, so there's history there. But then there's also the Haitians and the Dominicans. Part of it is that there's a lot of resentment between the Dominicans and the against the Haitians. Haiti became independent much sooner than the Dominicans did. They were a very rich country. While the Dominican Republic, were much poorer, and obviously they didn't become independent for much after that. But then there was a lot of corruption in the government in Haiti. They owed a lot of money to the French, and so they essentially were sucked dry, and now they're poor. There's a lot of poverty, and it's sort of trickled into the Dominican Republic. And so, there's a lot of immigration, or I would say migration. They share the same island to the Dominican Republic, and so it's crazy because I hear my father's side talking about it, and it sounds like the way white people talk about immigrants here. They're like, they're taking our jobs, they're marrying our women, like, you know what I mean? Like that's how they talk about it, and I'm just like, well. I mean, they sound like people here when they, talk about immigrants. And, one of the things that I told my aunt, it's just like, if you don't believe in immigration, like you're here, you're not from this country, and you were welcomed here, and you were given a ton of opportunities living here. How do you believe in it for yourself, but you don't believe in it for other people that are coming into the Dominican Republic? That's sort of some hypocrisy. And then she goes on to explain, all the myths and lies about Haitians, and then she always pauses and says, well, your husband and his family are different. And she refers
to the different thing.
Reverse racism. So then we go with racism again.
Yeah.
And going back to what Siobhan said, when we talk about religion, we got to hit each religion. In college, when I was going through this class in religion, we had a teacher that was an atheist that was teaching us religion, right? That's the contradiction. So that was so weird, but I got to see every religion for what it was. Every religion from the time it started caused a war. Lots of people died. That was Christianity. That was Islam. That was Buddhism. Every religion that's out here caused mass hysteria, because either you're going to be what I told you to be or you're going to die. The same thing is happening with racism. We're the minority. At the time, Caucasians were the minority. So because they were the minority, they had to solidify their place. So they solidified their place, and at the time of solidifying their place, what has happened is either you're going to be like me or not. So now it's been all this killing, all this lynching, all this control, and it went away for a minute, but it really didn't go away. It went away in a sense that now we have to take it to in the boardrooms and put on a suit and put a police officer suit on now and change it so it doesn't look the same way it did, but it is the same way it is. So we can say it's not the same way, but it is the same way, and cover it up when we go to court, and cover it up when we do all these things. And we do it all in the name of religion, all in the name of keeping everything pure, all in the name of this. It is a terroristic attack. However, if we put terroristic attack on it, that means everybody that's in this particular group that's terrorizing these other races will be called terrorists. So that means I would have to call my other Caucasian counterparts terrorists. But I don't want to do that, because that is making my minority even smaller. And I hate saying minority, because a minority means that you're less than. You know, minority means you're less than, and that's why they call African Americans, Africans, or anyone that's in a smaller group minorities, because you consider, you know, less than. But I want to know, when was the time that you realized that everything that we've been talking about up to now, when was the time that you realized that it was all a lie? When did you realize it? Was it like a aha moment, like, oh my God, everything I have learned up until this point has been a lie, and now my eyes are open, I am out of the matrix womb, I can see everything for what it is, I don't see things in numbers anymore like the movie Matrix.
Yeah.
I actually can see my sister and brother for who they really are, or are you still locked up in the matrix and can't see the truth?
So for me, I can start really quick. For me, to be honest with you, nothing that was ever fed to me seemed right, because I looked more like them than like my own family, you know? So for me, it was always, I was like a raised eyebrow, like, really? Like, so, you know, I don't feel like I ever had like that aha moment. I just always kind of like was somewhat conscious of the fact that, you know, it stemmed from something, you know, bigger than just, you know, because we all, I mean, like I said, I'm a little lighter than my father. My father's like, you would never think that he looks black. So, you know, it's like, you know, they would talk about, you know, Haitians and whatever. And I'm like, but my dad looks like them. So for me, I never had that, like that aha moment. I always felt like it was somewhat wrong. Yeah. So the other thing that I wanted to mention that I didn't when I was talking about, you know, the whole, you know, the Haitians versus Dominican, is that Haitians, they are more in tune with like their African roots, and they see Africa as like the motherland, whereas Dominican Republic, they more align with the Spanish side, and so that's where the whole white thing comes from, right? And so, you know, because there's that difference, they, you know, they draw that line. So I think I just wanted to mention that really quick, because they're, you know, they're more mixed with Spanish, and Haitians are mixed with French, and all right.
I know, and for me, I think I sort of, just like Catherine, in Bolivia, it's more, the colorism has some more to do with how indigenous you look. And my father was indigenous, and so he was darker, he had a different features, which I have of his. And my mother's family was closer to Spain, so they are considered white. And so when my parents separated, I lived with my father. And in his house, I was white. But when I went to my mother's family, I was no longer white, I was Indian. And so early on, I realized that it was all made up, you know, because they were both my family, you know, but in my mother's family, my nose, my round face, those were considered ugly features. Like my aunts would even like complain that I was getting too dark in the sun, you know, because I didn't look like them. But then I would go home to La Paz, to my father's family, and there I was lighter. So, you know, somehow I was prettier there. And so none of that really made sense to me. And it was even he was even weirder to come to the United States and be in this kind of in between where I was still the other, but it had nothing to do with the other that I was before. You know, here I was like Hispanic, Mexican, or whatever people wanted to believe. So I was still the other, and I was still not as pretty as the general population. So I think over time, you live in that kind of confusing time and you think, this doesn't even make sense, you know, because we all share blood, we all are the same. And yet, you know, they want to differentiate from each other. I mean, you should see the picture of my family in Bolivia. You get all shades, you know, and it doesn't matter because some of them still will consider themselves white. And they will insist they are, even though they look more like me. So part of that is colonization because, and part of it too, just like Africa, you know, I think people tend to think of South America as being one big place. Well, the thing is, we're not, because besides being different nations, there are also different people that lived there before the Spanish came. And so there are contentions between those people. They don't like each other. So the Aymara people will say, well, the Quechua people, they'll cheat you out of everything, you know?
Yeah.
Or, you know, the Quechua will say, well, the Aymara people, they're lazy, they don't want to work, you know? So I think when you've lived in different cultures like that, and people keep saying different things about each of them, you realize that it's all made up, you know? And, but I also think that there's a lot that I've internalized because when I see myself, I still get those negative connotations of,
Wow.
you know, I'm not pretty, I'm less than, I'm whatever, you know? So,
That's deep.
yeah, so, yeah, I think early on as a child, I realized it was all silliness. And as an adult now, I think, why is it that we can't get over it? You know, why is it that we can't see people and not like always be comparing and just labeling people? You know, it doesn't make sense to me.
And you, Zanetta, what is your input on this, Zanetta?
For me, and I think I may have mentioned this in the beginning, I'm a proud Army brat. So although I was born in the United States, I grew up all over the world. So I was exposed to different people and different cultures my entire life from the time I was born. And so my family, my parents, first of all, my family unit was always just us. I mean, because we weren't here with other family. It was those of us that were traveling around all over the world, my siblings and my parents. And my parents, I was fortunate in that neither one of my parents gave any of this bias to us. So we didn't grow up with that. And living everywhere, I didn't grow up thinking, well, you know, I'm just going to hate Africans or I'm going to dislike Hispanics for, you know, for whatever reasons, because we live there. And when you move around like I do, you make friends with whoever you are there with. That's just the way the life is. That's the way I grew up. That's the way my life is. So personally, I didn't get that, but I do see it. And as an adult, I've heard it come from the community, the wider community now. And for me, I just can almost always tie all of it back to the colonizers. I mean, I think about Tega's point about the missionaries and the mission. Again, those were usually colonizers. I think about what Elizabeth said, and then you've got when the Spanish came in, and they are aligned with the colonizers. Again, they're at, if you want to talk about the hierarchy, they're there at that point. So all of it to me kind of leads back to that. The media, when we talk about the images that other people get, when they're talking about what they see from us and how they get these ideas in Africa, or wherever they are, they're getting it from the media. And well, who controls our media? It's not us. We're not. Only recently. That's why people make such a big deal about the Black Panther. Finally. But look at how long it took. Look at how long it took. And I'm hoping that this will change things. I don't know how much of it will change, because we still don't have that control. We don't have the power or the money to control all of that.
Yeah.
So those images that people are getting from the media are, again, tied back to colonization, because that's who's in control and holds all of it.
Yep.
So for me, it all kind of ties right back to one central point. And I agree with Elizabeth in one aspect that, and I can't remember if it was Keo or Siobhan that said, someone said it, that what can you imagine what a force we would be if we could get them out of our minds and just get together and organize, what a force we would be.
Yeah.
You know, I think in terms of solutions though, like, I mean, I feel like Zanetta, I don't know, I don't want to speak for you, but it does somewhat feel a little bit, you feel helpless and hopeless. I think it's a little different with this topic than colorism, because colorism, I think there's less, you know, there's things you can do within your family and stuff, but I think because some of us are the ones that are spreading this stuff, like these white lies, that there's a lot that we can do ourselves, and in terms of holding other people accountable.
Yep.
One of the things that I thought about, I can't remember who was, I think I'm pointing to you, but you're in the I don't know how to say your name, I'm so sorry. Was saying this was that, you know, about the whole Kwanzaa holiday thing, and it made me think about like how many times like I've seen someone, you know, either appropriating another culture and like they're not maybe respecting certain things about it, you know, just calling that out like when you see it, and you know, when you hear these myths and lies about other cultures, that you encourage them to get to know people from the country, to sort of learn about it, and for you, even for ourselves, like, you know, if there's something that, you know, that we want to know about, like, you know, or that we've heard about that we want to sort of debunk, like, you know, that, you know, the world is much smaller now with social media. Find somebody that you can link up with, help you through that, you know. So I'm a little bit more hopeful when it comes to this.
Yeah. I agree with Kat. I mean, and just to piggyback to that, how effective that is. My aha moment came from living among African Americans. I mean, it was the best thing that happened to me. I can't express how much repenting I had to do after living among African Americans for so long, and coming to understand them and appreciate them, and in contrast to what you never see about in books. But then on the other hand, what to do about that? So I went among them and I lived among them, right? I think we have to find ways of getting into people's cultures, not so much to go do stuff for them, but to just live among them. I think part of the problem with missions is people are constantly trying to do something for people, and then they miss out connecting, they miss out learning, because they keep trying to tell you what they think you need to know. And it's not only when they go to Africa. I cannot tell you, I'm working on my 3rd degree, I cannot tell you how many people come into my space and not even try to find out what I know as a pastor. They know I went to seminary, they know I have a master's. They're going to immediately look down on me, and they read one book and they want to tell me how to pastor. You know, because why? In their minds, they've never seen images of a person from Africa being in a leadership position. But is it that these people, we don't really have women leaders? That's not true. I want to go back to what Siobhan said, because in some ways, we people of color, we're complicit in this. In the ways that I think greed is the driving force. And unfortunately, greed and good intentions, they don't go well together. So there are lots of Westerners who have good intentions and they want to do good with their money and they're looking for poor people. And then there are lots of people of color countries who want to exploit that. That's how the brother selling brother into slavery occurred. It was exploitation. So with this whole issue, I think that one of the ways we can really break down and deconstruct this single story, the danger of the single story, we people of color, we need to step up. It's going to be harder, it's going to take a longer time, but we need to start putting our gifts to use. We need to stop taking handouts. For real, we need to stop. Just stop. Just stop and just put out what is in you and stand your ground and do it. You want to write a book, go ahead. You know, it's funny, I was an avid reader growing up in Nigeria. I never read one book that talk about African Americans, but I read books. Every single book I read from America, it was white folks. So yeah, we don't have enough money, but we got to come together and support one another. Those people who like writing, get together, form a cooperative where we come together, support each other, publish each other's books. We got to do something to get ourselves out of the mess. We have to do something to get our voices out there. And yes, people of color and people of color countries, stop taking the handouts. Stop making it difficult for people to see the real you. And then our brothers and sisters, our Caucasian brothers and sisters, this is a real passionate thing for me. Stop assuming that people of color need always to be educated by you. It's very frustrating to go to the same schools, to graduate the same way, and to still be seen as less than your American counterpart or your Caucasian counterpart. So we need to stop and let go of that pride. That is a prideful thing is not a good thing for Christians. We need to let go of that pride of thinking that we know better. Sit down and see what the other people know. It may not be what you're seeking, but it might be getting to know you. As an educated woman who came to live among a lot of people who don't have degrees, they educated me. I haven't had a chance to educate many of them, but they have educated me big time. And it just came from learning to just live among them and just know them without agenda.
Yeah. But that's key. What you said, unfortunately, what you said was so key. There was a book I read about the true truth of American history. The government took it off the shelves because it was so true. It was so true of every American president. They took it off the shelves and they was basically gonna kill the man who wrote the book because he gave all the whole truth. And what he said was the greed of the African American man has been his downfall since the beginning of time. And because of the greed, that's what the colonizer has used against us. Greed.
Yep.
And if we actually help each other without saying, I got mine, now you get yours.
Yeah.
I know back in the day when with Martin Luther King and during during the time of the black what do you call that?
Civil rights?
Yes, during the time of over there in Oklahoma when they had the Black Wall Street, and also during the time of Martin Luther King, all blacks got together and they helped each other. During the Black Wall Street, they had just got away with slavery. You know, slavery was done, but there were still women that would still go and work into, white people's homes. And what they would do if she got sick, then the sisters in the town would take care of her home, cook dinner for the week, make sure she was good, take care of her home, make sure the children were good, make sure their hair was done, make sure all the clothes was washed, and even went to the house of the person that she was doing the work for and did her work. So she would be able to still get the pay. They would work for her and give her the pay and make sure her house was still running. And I'm like, what happened to that time? And then I thought about it. during Jim Crow time and during slavery time, it was said that if you kill one in front of everyone, everyone would get scared. Well, we're looking at it all over again with the police doing everything in the streets, not only to African Americans, to every people of color. And what you see on television is just African Americans. But when you look online and you see everything that's there on YouTube, it's every person of color. It's Puerto Ricans, it's Mexicans, it's all Latinos, it's anyone with any tanness to their skin, that everyone is being handled roughly. And even Caucasian women who are dating African American men, or a Caucasian male that is dating an African American female, or anyone of color. But the only thing that you get to see when they put on television, or what you get to see on Facebook, is a person of African American nation. But it's not just that. And what we need to do is we need to just get behind each other. We need to support each other. And we just don't do that anymore. It's just like, I got mine, now you get yours. I'll help you get yours, but you're going to have to pay me a fee to get it. But that's still not helping. That's still not helping. That's helping me put money in your pockets, but you're still not helping me. From A to B. And then when I get to B, now I got to pay you a little bit more money to get to C. And then to get from C to G, I got to pay you more money to get there. But that's not helping. That's not helping the process. Because if I'm constantly laying your pocket,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt you, and I want to apologize because my phone is being anti-black right now, and it keeps logging me off and logging me back on. The feds don't want me to be great, whatever. But I wanted to give a little bit of a pushback for when you was talking about the greed thing. I think that also, of course, there's always going to be greed everywhere, but you also have to understand the fact that it's not just about greed. It's the fact that African Americans, well, I'm gonna say black people, when put in a situation where they don't have resources, lack of education, so they're put into a place where they have to basically go on survival tactics. And that also goes with what I was talking about earlier about conditioning. We are being conditioned to think that we all can't eat, we all can't share eat at the same table. Is that if you help somebody else, you're going to go without, and that goes with basic human survival tactics. They're going to want is self-preservation. So I don't think it's always about greed. I also think it's about conditioning, and also with the civil rights, it was not always about unity, because they didn't have unity back then either. They were fighting amongst themselves. They don't talk about that. They were also fighting amongst themselves as well. But I think what the problem is we have to unlearn these things before we can even move a step forward. We need to unlearn these things, and we need to take our own narratives and teach this among our children, or to our children, because, like I said, it's not always about greed. It's a condition, and if you're put in a situation where you have so if you're in the projects, you'll have more liquor stores than you would have organic grocery stores in the hood. And when you're put in that dire situation, you're going to do what you have to do to provide for your family. And a lot of times it's not like they don't want to help. We don't want to help each other. Sometimes we just can't. We don't have the funds. We don't have the resources. And because I do remember growing up when we was when a block party, we had I guess you would call it a block party. Not everybody had a lot of food, so everybody will cook something and everybody will get on the porch and everybody would eat. But because they've been slowly taking away our resources, and the thing is, and a lot of people are complicit. And then the ones that do get a little get more than some of the others, they're taught okay, well, you're gonna have to make sure they don't get it because you're gonna lose what little you got. And that stemming over generations gives us this mentality where even it looks like greed, but it's not. And then saying greed, that also gives a negative connotation toward Black people, that we're not gonna help each other because we're greedy or because we're selfish.
But greed, you don't even have to have a lot of money. You can have one penny in your pocket and you could be greedy.
You know what? See, for me, I'm gonna push back a little bit on that too, because I don't really think it's a black thing. I think it's a capitalistic thing. We
Yep.
Yeah.
and here, because if you go to I'm gonna say my country, there's some areas that are really, really poor, but culturally, we share. Culturally, it doesn't matter how poor you are, we break bread, so I don't think it's a black thing. I think it's a United States thing. I think that's just here. And when you live in a place where, I mean, sharing could mean that you don't have, your next meal, you know what I mean? Like, that's just the way people live here. And I think that, even within my culture, that's changed. Like, you don't, coming here, it's no longer that, no matter what, you still break bread. No, it's, that's, I'm gonna be tight. You know what I mean? Like, so I think we see it, and you can speak on it as a black person because that's what you see it amongst your peers. But it's no different white people. In fact, I feel like it's even that much worse. In terms of interacting with black people, white people, and the way they operate.
I agree with that.
Yeah, plus I think. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I think that it's complex. Obviously, one of the things I've noticed, having made it up so far in the capitalist system in a corporation, is that we're very isolated. So you won't see another Hispanic person at my level. You won't see, and then you are not in a position to help other people, even though you have that in mind. I mean, all the time that I was in a corporation, my idea was the more power I get, the more I can help other people. But it seems like you never get to that point because you're isolated. And then there's racism and everything else. So you're holding on to that precarious position. You don't ever feel secure in it, and you're never given the power to really do more. So you feel guilty when you're in that position because you know that you have a responsibility for others, and yet you also don't want to lose your place there, unfortunately.
And our places are at rest all the time, every day, like, from one day to the next. Just being a person of color, you might think you're stable for a minute, but the next day you can come into work and guess what? Like, you might have been you know what I mean? And I feel like, I think that, especially these days, I feel like you see it more. I mean, I think it's always been there. But there's a lot of racism within the workplace, and these are things that people of color are dealing with. We're dealing with health issues. We're dealing with things that are unpredictable. So when you have, it's like you want to hold on to it because you never know when you're gonna lose it. So I don't really think it's great. I think we as people are inherently more given than the white race. I think there are a lot. I don't want to speak badly about them, but I think people
think about themselves. I'll say it for you.
I think culturally, I think we are. I don't see it as greed at all. I just think that we're driven by the society that we live in today. We have to protect ourselves. We have to protect our families. And I feel like that's a huge part of it. So
Well,
I think also that we have bought the. Sorry, Darlene, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say, I think that what I'm hearing a lot of from Siobhan, Elizabeth, and Catherine is that what it really is, we are often, the majority of the time, operating in a survival mode.
Right.
And because we have to people of color have to deal with so much that we're just in a survival mode. And so it may be perceived one way when it really is, we're just trying to survive.
Yeah, I think I will add to that again and push back and say that greed thing is a real thing for many people of color countries. As a person who grew up in one and who saw Nigeria start off really great. When I was growing up, I've shared this story before. When I was growing up, our naira was stronger than the dollar. The naira was it was par with the pound. It was 1 naira to 1 pound, and it was $2 to 1 naira. It was stronger than the dollar. Now, do you know how much it is? It's 353 naira to $1 today. How did that happen? Is the issue of greed on the parts of the leaders of people of color countries, but it's also the issue of believing the lie that Western way is better. And suddenly we lost that ability to believe in ourselves. I don't know how people can think that there is a country in this world that is created so poor. And I think the reason that some Americans would think that way is because I don't think they teach geography in schools. Because when you learn geography, you're going to see that each nation, God put the resources. The continent of Africa supplies the world most of the resources, the gold, the diamond, the oil. Nigeria is the top producing oil country. But over the years, as each leader came in and got more greedy and started caving in to the Western ideas, they stopped believing in themselves. So I think that's where we're gonna have to crawl back on our own. One of the things that I like, I went this past week. I was at a seminar where I heard Dr. Shaniqua Walker-Ban speak, and she used an analogy from The Color Purple, and she's talking about Celie and how Celie had come to her freedom, emancipation, and how she had to, on her own, she was talking to God, and she worked through this thing personally where she had to come to this place of self-realization that she was inherently worthy. And when she came to that place, she took her freedom. Nobody gave it to her. I think we need to stop sitting around and thinking that someone is going to come fix it. We, as people of color, we need to take responsibility. Stop pulling back those handouts that diminish us. When trade, we have enough to trade with. Make them pay for something, and that be the exchange. Don't have people shipping all this free stuff to you. When people are dependent for too long, it changes their mentality of who they are. They lose productivity.
It extends a bit.
Are you talking about the individuals in power? Are you talking about the individuals in power or people?
We are talking about people of color countries in general. It's a systemic thing. It's not an individual thing.
Because like when you was talking about how like they got into power, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't want to misquote you, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said they got with the resources, and it seemed like they got greedy, and the people in the countries of color, their leadership got greedy, and I guess, but the way you was describing it describes basically, and it's about they feel like the Western idea is better. That's still capitalism. That's what I'm saying.
But capitalism is built on greed, though. Capitalism is driven by greed.
Capitalism
the desire to control makes them feed you a lie. You gotta believe the lie. It's not really about it.
I don't think it's about control. I think capitalism is based in consumption.
Well, consumption is based on greed. You can make me consume what I don't lust after.
But the thing is, the word consume has to be put in the context of how you're using it. Like if you're going to eat something, you do consume it. It doesn't make you greedy, but you need to consume this in order to survive. But I think,
yes, Siobhan, I think you are relating it back again to the African American context. But this whole issue for people of color that is not limited to the African American context. A lot of people of color countries, they're not in survival mode. They're not. And if we believe that they're in survival mode, that is a lie that we have bought.
No,
but it seems like, I'm sorry, because I want to make sure I don't want to misquote you or anything. I want to make sure I understand what you're saying, because it seems like you're saying that most of these countries of color, they're basing it of they're just greedy. Is not, they don't care about the other people. It's just
no. I've explained to you the two things going on there. when you buy into the lie of westernization, it robs you of your identity. And that robbing of identity allows us to lose our place in line, where we now start to refigure or reframe everything we are to meet the Western way. Now, let me give you an example, okay? So for example, talk about Nigeria. Growing up again, I left Nigeria when I was 26 years old, okay? Before that time, we were serving all kinds of things to many nations in the world. You go many places, you were seeing products. You don't see that anymore because there's no exchange of trade anymore. Instead, everybody's buying stuff from the West. We are hardly producing anything. And when you don't produce, you don't have foreign exchange and your money drops. And when your money drops, that's why your country is poor. That's when the country becomes poor. And when the country becomes poor, then yes, people lose a sense that they believe there's really nothing, but the stuff's still there. The oil is still there, still being produced. But what's happening? The leaders are taking that oil. They're not seeing that their country needs them. They want to come build houses buy houses in the US, put the money in the Swiss banks. So, and that's the part people of color part. The Western part is where capitalism makes them want to, let's send you our stuff. Let's make you dependent on our stuff.
But the Western countries aren't really producing anything here either. And I understand what you're saying. I'm coming from the
let me take that back. They're not producing.
That's what I know.
No, let me tell you. No, I'm gonna tell you that that's not true. See, if you're a person,
like the things that's manufactured. I'm sorry. I was like, because I'm coming from the standpoint of an African American that grew up in this country, because a lot of the manufacturing jobs that we was doing producing is not being produced here. It's being produced in other countries.
Yeah, but they're owned by Americans. Don't you see that?
But they're
no. Let me give you an example, Siobhan. Hold on.
Are you talking about Nigeria again?
Come on, yes, I will, because that's the context I know. We all have to.
But you just got on me from I'm talking about African American experiences, because that's why I was doing the same thing you're doing. You're talking about based on experiences that you know. Your experiences with Nigeria, so you're going to refer to Nigeria. My experiences as an African American in this country. So
yeah, but I'm going to relate it to you. You're thinking that you don't produce anything that comes to us. I'm going to tell you that you do.
No. I'm not saying that we don't produce anything that comes to you. What I'm saying is not being produced here.
It doesn't have to be. Let me tell you, do you know, let me tell you something. Do you know that there is, do you know that there is an American that owns an oil company in Nigeria? An American.
I didn't know about.
How do you get to own natural resources in another country?
That goes back to colonialism.
You know, and this guy came up. Yeah, go ahead.
When you speak about people not expecting handouts and that message that you're sending, for me, what I'm hearing is that same message that white people say, like, pick yourself up from your bootstraps. And I can't, like, that message I have to push back on, because, you know, what I'm hearing from you still sounds like, white supremacy and you know, the people who are in power are pretty much dictating. And yes, the Western message is coming into your country, but when you say things like, you know, people of color country need to stop expecting handouts and, you know, do what they need to do. But a lot of these countries, they've been wiped out from their resources. Their resources have been completely dry. Like, you think about, you know, Puerto Rico right now and the conditions of Puerto Rico, there's nothing that they can do because all of their natural resources have been sucked dry. They have nothing. When the United States took over Puerto Rico, it's because they, you know, the sugar cane and, you know, all the natural resources that it had.
Yes.
And the banana wars.
They sucked the island dry. There's nothing there for them now. Now they, you know, they get to wipe their hands clean. This is what they do in countries. And so when you say people of color need to stop expecting handouts, like, they literally have nothing else to do.
No, but you know, there is something they can do. And let me give you an example again. This is an American example. The places that I see those wipeouts a lot, especially in southwestern PA, we are living in the dregs of the steel mills. Okay, so you came, you did what you had to do, you've left, and you left poverty behind. And yet there are still funds that other places will take in the name of the poor people and never use them. What we need are leaders who will stand up and demand what belongs to their folks.
They're actually getting paid not to farm.
I'm sorry?
Some of these farmland, they're actually getting paid not to farm. So it's not that it's like they're not gonna use it to produce like corn or whatever they have. Because I'm like I said, I'm from Jersey, like the Garden State. There's farms with acres of land where they can do and feed thousands of people, but the government is paying them not to farm.
Okay.
So the question should be, why are they paying them not to farm?
Exactly. And that's when
it's being made inside of a laboratory. There's nothing being made out of the ground anymore.
Put people of color in a food apartheid, which a lot of it, like I said, because I'm Black from here, I'm speaking on these experiences, and I'm not going to speak on any other experiences that I don't know because I would be wrong. But from my personal experience, they're putting people of color here, and I'm sure in other countries in food apartheids, because if you control their food, you control their people. So even if they want to fight back, they can't fight back because they don't have the food. They don't have the energy. They have to feed their babies, so they have to do what they're being told to do. So,
okay. So here is where I want to explain a little bit about when I say people of color need to stand up for themselves. Your leaders, if your leaders don't have your welfare at heart, they're going to sell you out. There is not a single country, no matter how little you have, you can bargain. You can bargain. But the issue of greed comes in when the leaders, our own leaders, sell us out. We're sold out.
But how do those people get into positions of leadership?
Yeah, but you see, the thing is, if we want to call, yeah.
Back to Puerto Rico. Puerto Ricans, they pay taxes. They don't get tax refund, and they don't get to vote for the government. They don't get to vote for the U.S.
Wow, I didn't know that.
So, they're citizens, but they're like second-class citizens. Here they are, pretty much, at like,
and they can't trade with other countries.
Right.
Oh.
So, how much can they do? Like,
okay, but that's why we have that's why we're having these forums. There's someone somewhere, the people who are listening, change starts with one person. It doesn't take something huge. That's why awareness matters. The more we educate people, what their power, their inherent power is, we have to be willing to march forward. And it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be pretty, but the thing we have to think about is if we don't march forward, we'll die in this mess. So what do we have to lose?
So you mentioned the whole leadership thing. It's hard, like for people of color to get into positions of leadership. Like I've helped in campaigns before. I feel like I do my part, but there's certain pockets or certain areas where you'll never see a person of color in a leadership. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, I was just helping a friend of mine who was campaigning for a councilwoman here in the city that I live in, and she was the first person of color to work for City Hall in a city that's 38% immigration population, and yet the first person, we're in 2018, the first person of color to work in City Hall. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And she couldn't get elected, so like you talk about, okay, so people of color need to get into these leadership roles. Who's getting into these leadership?
I'm gonna say it again. If we don't think that we can do it, we will not do it. We have to start from somewhere. The journey of 1,000 steps, that's in one day. More people stand up. People have been doing. Turn around and we support one another. And one of the things we don't do is support one another. That's not
necessarily true. That's not necessarily true. And I will attest to that because of the work that I do. And I'm going to talk because there's a lot of people that's out here doing the work, they're not getting the recognition. And because they don't get the recognition because we don't do this for the recognition. We don't do it for attention. There are people that's working, but we only work with what little that we have. Like there's some things I do. I don't get paid for the work that I do. I do it because it needs to be done, and I do it because I love my people. And the thing is, and if I was in a position of power, but the thing is, you have to understand, like we're already looked at as a second class citizen, regardless, because one, we're color, two, we're women of color. So automatically, we're going to be dismissed. And then, and in order for us to be able to work together, first thing that needs to be on is capitalism. That has to be going, because even if we do have people in leadership positions, if they're like the whole saying, if you stare into the abyss long enough, and start staring back at you. As long as capitalism's there, regardless, if we get somebody in a leadership position, if they're long enough, they're going to start subscribing to the same capitalism. Yeah. It's going to be the same cycle all over again. So, in order for that, we need to work on how we dismantle capitalism in itself in order to be more effective, to be the whole one village, the whole one people, one group, one family.
Yeah, but we're not striving for utopia. We're walking one step at a time. See, the thing is, if we look at in my opinion, if we look at the whole picture and try to fix the whole picture, we'll never make a step. But if we start from where we're at, we will do it. For example, a lot of us sitting here, you're here today because you're tired of the whole system and you want to make a difference. This is us making a difference. There's going to be couple hundred people watching us. 2, 3 are going to stand up from there and say, you know what, I can do this. I'm going to push. And I believe in God that as long as people find their power, freedom will follow. Capitalism will be dismantled by everybody taking one little step. But it's not, I don't think that there is one prescription to bring down the entire oppressive system. I think it's going to be the little painful steps that one person takes and another person takes to resist.
I just want to add a part.
But who gets to choose which? You're talking about one step at a time. So which one will be deemed more important to start with, that one step, and who gets to choose that one step?
Everybody choose the step that's right for you. For example, us. Let's give an example. Just us here in this organization. This was a step we took to get our voices heard on a Christian platform. But that's a step that we said, no, our voices are not being heard. We want a platform where our voices will be heard. Yes, we're not big, we're not popular, but people are listening. I have friends I have watched the thoughts they had before we had these voices of color. I've seen their lack of understanding about racial issues. I've seen it change just from the 1 year plus that we have been producing. You know, so I think wherever we're at, where you say bloom where you're planted, we have to believe in the collective power. As a Christian, this is one of the things I believe. When God puts something in my heart to do, I don't get freaked out by the overall picture, because I believe somewhere He's putting it in so many hearts also. And if each person is obedient to what's in their heart, then somehow His Spirit will pull it all together. But I don't think that we can have a defeatist attitude.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kat.
I agree with you. I'm sorry. I do agree with you. But I feel like, the comment about, sort of just putting the onus and the sort of the blame on.
No, I wasn't. I wasn't putting the onus on them, because remember, I talked this both ways. I already gave my prescriptions to the white folks. I called out our white brothers and sisters, stuff they need to stop doing.
It doesn't mean
they need to stop. So let me give you an example. That one that really gets my point. I have to speak from the Christian perspective, because that's where my whole life
is. Everybody's Christian.
All right.
Not everybody's Christian.
Excuse me, I have to speak from my perspective to give you my example. So for example, missionaries, they go to a lot of people of color countries. There are people of color who are working in those countries, who are producing stuff. So if they see those kind of things, they can decide, oh, you know what, invite one of them Instead of trying to raise money to go to Africa, raise money to bring someone who has their stuff and give them an opportunity to sell it over here. Create the opportunities for trade. Let people make their money. Let them be part of the developed world. What there was Magata Wade, she's an entrepreneur from Senegal. One of the things that I've heard her argue a lot for the free market, we're talking about issue of dismantling capitalism, she argues African products, because she's from Africa, right? African products need their place on the market, and white folks need to start buying our products. You can't be selling us stuff all the time and then not wanting to buy our stuff. Then you are impoverishing us. You got to trade with us so we can have our own money. You know, so they have that. They need to hire our people. Stop doing our job for us. Don't come in. You want to teach something about culture? Hire me. Hire a Black person to do it. Don't go and hire a person of color. Don't go hire a white person. Go look for the authors. You want to do a study on Black studies or whatever? Go look for the authors. Create a market for us. So they have the complicity in that, where if they refuse to create space for us to be at that table, we have to demand it, but at the same time, we have to call them out for not letting us be at the table. So it's a both end. That's in my
I just want to add something real quick. I just want to, we'll go with Siobhan. I just want to add something real quick. When we was talking about that, I remember there was a time, I'm going to talk from the African-American standpoint of being here in Atlanta and being homeless with my husband, my daughter, and my 2 dogs. So we were homeless. We lost everything. So don't assume that you see me in this nice place now that everything was always good. So we lost everything. And yes, I did ask people to assist, but I'm an Army veteran, so I don't ask people for a lot. So if I ask, that means I'm down to nothing. No one helped, so I said, okay, what you're gonna do is you're gonna go back to your training, number one. Number two, you're gonna go back to your training from being in the country, growing up on the farm. You're just gonna, I know y'all don't like this term, but this is what I had to do. I had to pull my bootstraps up and say, look, ain't nobody gonna do this. My husband got depressed, I was depressed. My daughter, she's young, she's looking at mom, she didn't ask to be here, she's looking at mom to do whatever she gotta do. So I went out and did whatever job I needed to do that was legal. I did think about illegal, I did, I'm just saying the truth. I thought about it, but I didn't do it. And now we are where we are today. I've had 2 cars that were debt free. They're good to go. Now I have another car because my other 2 cars that were debt free died. So I have another car. So I'm coming from an African-American standpoint. I've seen the worst of the worst, and I've also seen the best of the best. I fought in 2 wars, one in Iraq and one in Afghanistan. I see the most ugliest things of Americans. I see the most ugliest things of the part of any person. When you go into war, you see the ugliness of people. You see what people would do. I have seen all of that. And still came out on the other side. I had an issue with PTSD and MST, military sexual trauma, for being raped in the military. So I'm just saying, sometimes in trying to come up with a solution to a problem, we look at the big picture and get frustrated with the big picture. You can't look at the big picture and get frustrated, because if I'd have looked at the big picture, I'd have still been on the street homeless. I would have had a place to stay. My car would have been gone. Me and my husband would have been separated and divorced. My daughter would have been somewhere tricky. If I would have given up, hey, beautiful, if I would have given and quit and looked at the big picture instead of just saying, put one foot and put it in front of the other one, put one foot in front of the other one, keep going, don't stop. That's the whole process here. The whole process here is saying, well, how do we get the whole group? It doesn't matter with the whole group right now. What you need to do is just see, this is my part. I take this step, I take this step, I take this step. What I'm seeing is, it's starting to be, what about this and what about that? That's what's happening to the people of color right now. We keep looking at what about this and what about this, and we're not making any steps.
Before I say anything, okay, my fault. And first, before anything else, I want to say I'm sorry that you went through that in the military. That should never happen. Before anything else, I know this cat was getting ready to say something. And before I say my piece, I want to make sure she has a chance to speak up. So go ahead, Mama, say your thing.
Sorry, no. I just wanted to. I mean, I know that that you kept explaining over and over again what you meant and your intentions, and now Renetta, with your experience and stuff, still talking about sort of like you kind of just have to like I said, pick yourself up from your bootstraps. There's a lot there that I feel like it is sort of a trigger for me, because this is what you hear from white people. So I just want us to change the language in terms of like how we're having that conversation and encouraging our brothers and sisters to to step into leadership roles, to step into whatever roles they can step into to influence change and to impact change, such as this awesome, great platform that you've created here. But change the language, because for me, that's the language of the oppressor, and that's the type of stuff that they are talking when they when they refer to us and when they talk about us, and our situation, that like it is real. It's not like, oh, people are just driven by greed, and they're expecting handouts. Like, these are all the things that is sort of you speak on it, and I feel like I understand where you're coming from, but using that language is really a trigger for me, because this is the language of the oppressor. These are the messages that we hear all the time whenever we're talking about racism or whenever we're talking about oppression. It's, well, you need to stop living in the past, or you need to stop living in your circumstances, and and do what you have to do. Like, trust me, like, I do what I need to do, and I know what my mission is, and I know where I'm going, and I understand my responsibility, and I want to encourage my brothers and sisters to do the same. But like I said, I think there needs to be sort of a shift and change in the language that we're using. Because it's the language of the oppressor. That's what they're telling us, So that's what I wanted to point out, that I feel like I understand some of the points that you were saying, but I really think that there's some stuff in there that I feel like, like I said, it's just.
I agree with you. I agree with you, Catherine. I think I have been there too, but I also feel lucky, and that I started out with a fairly good intelligence, that is education. And there have been times where, all I had was a bag of rice to last me the whole month. So I know what it is. And I have always tried hard. But one thing about it is that, first of all, I was raised a certain way. Mm-hmm. Second of all, I have certain skills, which not everybody has. And third of all, at any point in that whole thing, I was lucky, because there were points and all of that where something little could have happened and it all would have been gone, So I feel really lucky, and I feel like I can cope with things, and I've been able to, as they said, pull up by my bootstraps, but that's because, my bootstraps weren't broken,
because you had boots.
And I was still, right, I had boots.
I'm going to say this, my fault, Elizabeth, and I like to say, like, finally, hi, it's finally good to see you, because I'm always seeing you on Facebook. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi there.
I'm gonna ask you, like, this whole bootstrap thing. I'm not gonna talk about other people's situations, because that's not my place. But I'm gonna tell you about my situation, and I want you to tell me how can I pull myself up by my bootstraps, so to speak. Yeah, I know you hate it. You know how I feel about that word too, and you know how I feel about it. People that don't know me, they know I work with a BLM, and I do the work. I don't get paid for none of the stuff that I do. But I'm gonna tell you right now, I have sickle cell. I'm 37 years old. I'll be 38 next Friday on the 19th, and they basically told me I wasn't gonna live past 37. So this Friday coming up is gonna be a big thing for me. Woo-hoo. I'm on. Thank you. I'm on disability right now. I get $700 a month for disability. I have 2 children. I have a grandchild, and her mother and I have them to keep them from being put in the foster care. I live in New Jersey where a studio apartment is $900. Now, how can I pull myself in the boosters when I go to social services for assistance? They tell me because I got that $700 a month, they can't help me. I can't get housing. They won't allow me to do that. They told me to actually call DIFUS on myself. Get this. And it's not that I'm a bad mother. I love my babies. I will do anything for my babies. But how am I supposed to pull myself up? And it's not like I've always been disabled. I worked for corporate America. I worked for the American Red Cross where I trained other people to be instructors. And because of my health issues, I can't do this. And the medication they got me on is strong medication. So even if I go get out, the problem for me is not getting the job. The problem is me holding the job, because when I'm in a hospital, I'm in a hospital for weeks at a time. So how am I, and people like me in my situation, how can we pull ourselves by our bootstraps? We don't have the foot. Half of us don't even have a foot to put the foot on. So how can we do that? Like, how can
I say something here? I want to reiterate again that I can understand that when we paraphrase stuff, we put it in the best way we understand it. But I never did say, let's pull ourselves up by the bootstraps. I gave specific things I thought we could do when I asked don't take. And I wasn't even talking about people, African Americans. I was talking about people of color countries who I know are becoming impoverished by the increased dependence on the West, the Western donations. So I think for the issue of the African American situation, that's part of the issue. We talked about the lies that people believe about why people are why they are. For me personally, that's one of the things I came to discover. My understanding that led me to appreciate African Americans more, having lived among them and studied the system. I understood why they are where they are. And that's why I do the work that I do today, trying to find, working actually to see how we can create change, not just on a moment by moment basis, but policy changes. Because again, that's the whole issue, is a systemic thing. It's not an individual thing, it's a systemic thing. So I don't want you to hear me in the African American context, because I haven't spoken about that and say pull yourself up by the bootstrap for the African American context. I'm working on I don't think that that's a situation that can be fixed by an individual. It's a situation that has to be fixed by changing policies.
And so my situation can go with any country of color. But what I want to put out, I noticed.
I wouldn't say that, Siobhan. I don't think so.
I wanted to put out, like, would you consider, like, from you being from Nigeria and us being me being African American, would you consider us like family? Would you consider us like distant cousins or distant relatives? Would you consider that of us?
You know what?
Because I noticed you said you had respect for African Americans, but by living among them, so like you just right there, you separated yourself.
Yeah, because there is a difference. I think there is a difference. I think I have come to realize that you have your unique heritage. You are American. You are American. I don't know why it's called African American, but you are American. And you have a heritage that started from a different point in America. Our experiences are not the same. And I think until we realize that we have to see the differences between us and appreciate why those differences are there. So for example, in the work that I do, I don't see, if I'm working with African Americans, I don't read them based on whatever situation I found them right now. I'm tracking back generations. What happened here? What happened here? What happened here? Because without that, you will never be able to overcome the stereotype that is presented to us in the books. You just believe the stereotypes, okay? So we need to understand there's a difference. It's the lack of understanding that difference that will make an African come in and look down on an African American, not understanding that, wait a minute, they didn't, you started out free. They didn't start out free. Even when slavery ended, who gave them the land? In Africa, you may be poor, but you have land. So here, how many African Americans have land? How many have houses are theirs? So there is a difference. Having said that, I do believe that we should see ourselves as cousins. And if what cousins mean in the African context, you're practically brothers and sisters. There's no cousin about it. You are the same family.
Okay, because like, let me ask you this. Like being in America, and I know like you just said like you notice the difference. There's a difference between us, and I do agree. There's a difference between Black Americans and people that were born in the countries in Africa that came over. But given this white supremacist country that we're in, and given that, I'm about to make me cuss again. I'm trying to be good at it. But given the administration that we're in, administration that we have right now, do you really think they will notice you as different, or will they see you as another Black woman?
Girl, can I tell you that I'm in the same, when it comes to that, we're all in the same boat.
So we're all in the same boat.
I think that's
we're all in the same boat.
I think that's a good starting place for us to build that connection between Africa and people that was born here.
Yeah.
I'm personally, I know I was born here, and I know you call me an American. No, I'm actually a POW. That's what my ancestors were taken from their homeland and brought here, which is actually an act of war. So I wouldn't consider myself an American. I would be American-ish, because I'm not afforded the same rights as an American. I'm not afforded the same freedom as an American. And being here, American basically means white. So
yeah,
I'm not white. So I'm not an American. They're not going to see me as an American.
Yeah.
But I think I really do believe that once the there's also this thing that was been going on with the African American communities, that the other people that they not only look down to us because we were enslaved and because they were free and all that. And the thing is, there was at one point that Black people did own land, but it was taken from them.
Yeah, that was Black Wall Street.
Land. Not just Black Wall Street, there's other things. And then not to mention that the atrocity, I'm not going to get too far, go deep in this, that's a whole nother story. But yeah, we did have land. And not to mention, that's a whole nother thing in itself, because they were giving us land that doesn't even belong to them.
Exactly. You know what, Siobhan, we're going to go ahead and round up because we're going to be finishing at 10 o'clock tonight. So we went over some very good things. We brought a lot of good things to light. We have seen each other's differences and we've seen each other's likes. We notice now that we also need to change our language. I guess my language is like that because I'm from the military, jumping out of planes, constantly from helicopters and stuff. So we always used to say something would happen, you would get hurt, and you would get hurt like real bad, and a bone would be sticking out. They'd be like, "Pick yourself by your bootstraps, get up, you gotta go, you gotta keep going." So I guess that's part of my lingo to just say that, because but you know, we can always change our lingo there. We can also respect each other's differences, because we saw a lot of differences here. We have me as an African American from the South. We have Siobhan as an African American from the North. We have Elizabeth from the North, that is of the Latino descendant. We have Zanetta, that is Zanetta. Are you Latina? Yes, no.
No. My parents are Black.
Okay, I apologize. I never heard that part. And Kat, who is also of the Latino nation, and so we saw the similarities, but we also saw the differences, and then we brought all of that together. And I guess that our steps now are just to take one step at a time. And each person that you meet on a daily basis, to take the motto from the church I go to here at World Changers, every day that you meet someone, your goal is to teach them a little bit something new that they didn't know. Yeah. I have a way of doing that. I have this face. I have a nonprofit. So I have this face that people just tell me all their business when they meet me. I don't know why, but I just do. I have this face. And so people tell me everything, and I share with them, and they share with me. And that's what life is about. Life is about sharing, listening, and growing. And each day, you're supposed to be ready on this path to show someone different about yourself and allow someone to show something different about you. So when we get to the end of this life, we've all been changed by some type of way.
Yeah.
We're no longer the same because when we grow up, we have challenges, we have differences, we are going to survival, and we go into the winners, and we come overcomers. So we thank you so very much for everyone coming tonight. We appreciate y'all, and I really appreciate you, ladies, because you. I'm leaving tonight with a different mindset, and I'm also learning to change my language because I don't want to be offensive to others that I speak to, and I thank you for that, Kat. I never knew that that was offensive to others. Um, the reason why I say Latino is I met a young lady and I kept saying Hispanic, and she was like, no, I prefer Latino. So I say Latino, so I'm not offensive. So I hope y'all, I'm not offensive to anyone by saying Latino. And I apologize to Dana, I didn't know that.
It was actually
Say that again.
Hispanic, just FYI. Not everybody Hispanic is Latino, is what I mean.
Okay. Okay, good. So I thank everyone for being on the call tonight. This was awesome. I have learned so much from you ladies, and I hope to meet you in face. If you ever come to Atlanta, look me up. Somebody knows me. My husband swears that everybody knows me. So please look me up, and we can eat, have lunch, and learn so much. Okay, we're going to go ahead and finish up with a prayer. Father God, I thank you for the words that you've given us tonight, Father God. I thank you for this time of fellowship. I thank you for this time of reflection. I thank you that we have all learned something from each other tonight. And Father God, I thank you for the small steps of change that we take. We know change doesn't happen overnight, Father God, but change happens step by step. I thank you for the wisdom that you've given us tonight, Father God. I thank you for the sound judgment that you've given us tonight, Father God. I thank you, Father God, that as we sleep tonight, you will give us witty and vicious concepts and advice, Father God, on where to go next. We thank you for this right now in the mighty name of Jesus. We receive it and believe it, and we know that our thinking and our believing needs to be one right now in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Y'all have a great night. It was such a pleasure speaking with you. Y'all have a great one. I love y'all.
Bye.